The Nashville Predators are about to kick off the final stretch run of the 2024 NHL season. So what are 3 goals for them to achieve before the end of the year? Plus, a couple of Milwaukee Admirals steal the show in the AHL All-Star Challenge. All coming up today on the Locked On Predators podcast.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making the Locked On Predators podcast your first listen of the day, every single day. We are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, want to start out with a special shout out to our loyal Locked On Pred heads out there, the everydayers who tune into every single show. We love you guys, and we appreciate the support you give us week in and week out. I'm Nick Morgan. I'm a writer at Penalty Box Radio, and I have a partner in crime.
You do. I'm Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer at the Hockey News.
Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. On today's show, there are 31 games left for the Nashville Predators this season. Not that many, folks. And as we come down the final stretch of the 2024 season, we're going to be looking at 3 goals the Predators can achieve between now and the end of the season, whether that's in the middle of April, whether that's at the end of a little bit of a playoff run. 3 goals we want to see the Predators achieve both on and off the ice. We're going to get to that coming up in just 1 second. But first, let's talk baby Preds.
You know I love it.
We had a couple of Nashville Predators prospects, Milwaukee Admirals players represent the team in the AHL All-Star Challenge this past Monday night. This is our first show since then. Ann, what did you think of the performance from Spencer Stastny and Yaroslav Askarov?
It was so great. Like, I thought the whole AHL All-Star Classic was really great. Skills competition that they had on Sunday. And then Monday, of course, they had the All-Star Challenge, this fun little 3-on-3 divisional tournament kind of thing. And so it was a really fun, it was a fun weekend to watch, or a fun event to watch. But I have to tell you, there is nothing more delightful than sending off 2 of your team's prospects and watching them absolutely shine against the best in the AHL. And that's exactly what happened with Yaroslav Askarov and Spencer Stastny. I think you know that when you put Yaroslav Askarov out on the ice in any situation, he is in some way or another going to steal the show, whether it's bench pressing the net, whether it is, trying for a goalie goal, whether it's some sort of wild save. And of course, that's exactly what Yaroslav Askarov did. Really stole the show, stole everyone's hearts, as he is wont to do when he is in form. But he played, he had a great weekend, some really fun moments with Yaroslav Askarov. But Spencer Stastny, not to be outshined. Spencer Stastny had a great weekend too. He finished second in the fastest skater competition, second only to the record holder of all time. And he was actually pretty darn close to beating that. So, of course, we know Spencer Stastny and his skating is just incredible. So it's great to see that highlighted. Had a 97.3 mile per hour shot in the hardest shot, scored a goal in the All-Star Challenge, and just played so well. It was really exciting because we kind of know what we have as we watch Milwaukee, and we've seen both of these guys come up to Nashville. But it's kind of helpful and healthy to see them competing against some of the best in their league. And of course, it's the All-Star Challenge. So while not everybody goes 100%, they sure go way more percent than they do in the NHL. So it was a really fun competition. It was great to see these guys do as well as they did.
Yeah, Stastny, I think, had a goal and at least 1 assist. He might have had 2. I can't quite remember off the top of my head, but there's 2 big takeaways for me. One is Spencer Stastny, because you see like the speed in which he skates with. You see, I think we got a chance to kind of see his well-rounded skill set. Because I mean, if you're, primarily watch Nashville and maybe you're not super familiar with the Milwaukee Admirals, or you haven't got a chance to see a lot of the ads games, you may only, know Spencer Stastny for his skating and maybe, his, sort of, I guess, like the defensive minded way in which he was used in Nashville. Right. And I think this is, if you were, just had that as the experience for Spencer Stastny, if you watch this AHL showcase, I think you see his more well-rounded skill set on display here. And maybe not all of it translates great to the NHL level. But I do think that is a sign that, hey, Spencer Stastny, a little bit of an older prospect, but still, I think, has some tools to really be successful in the NHL level. And the other takeaway, Anne, Yaroslav Askarov is going to be a star in the National Hockey League when he gets here. Yep. It was funny because what was it? It was like 2-3 weeks ago. We saw an article from The Athletic about goaltenders in the NHL and, sort of transitioning from the past of, Dominic Hasek and Martin Brodeur and Patrick Waugh till now. And, the headline was like, there's a lack of personality in this, era of goaltending. And I read that and it's like, oh, just wait till number 30 on Nashville.
And we got a guy for you.
Do we have a guy you're going to be interested in? And you saw it on display. We talked a little bit Monday about his performance in the skills contest where he's just diving and poke checking on the breakaway, making saves with no pads. He showboated a little bit in the All-Star Challenge, like made a great save, like turned around and like flexed to the crowd, like, kind of like trash talk some of the players coming his way in a fun way, not like, not in a Brendan Gallagher way. And, the takeaway was, we had some fellow Locked On hosts there, JD Young from Locked On Sharks, Jay Foster from Locked On Blue Jackets. And I think it was Jay that said, like, on Twitter, it's like, holy crap, Askarov is fun.
Yeah.
Like, Yara Askarov is going to be awesome to watch.
Yeah, he's fun. And I also think he is such a great balance of just athleticism. This is somebody, for as fun as Askarov is, this is somebody who is so committed to his craft and to his sport. Like, this is a hard-working, super competitive young man, but he balances that seriousness and that athleticism with just the most endearing showmanship. It's amazing to watch. But I was kind of messaging back and forth with Jay, and Jay was like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, you may look, you may not touch. Like, Askarov is ours. Like, get your own.
Yeah. Unless you have a first, like a top 5 blue chip prospect for us, hands off.
Yeah.
But that's cool, Ann, because I think somebody like that is somebody who's going to draw some eyes to the NHL. I think a lot of people are going to have fun watching him, whether it's with Nashville, whether he's a trade chip for somewhere else, like wherever he winds up, whoever he winds up playing for. I mean, you're shaking your head, but he was on the trade block last summer. So
I know, I get why people would want him. I just think, man, Nashville, you have your goaltending future right there. I'm also not saying I think he's ready to be the starter, but it's right there, man. You're gonna have to bring a deal to pry Yaroslav Askarov out of my cold dead hand.
But the point being, just wherever he winds up, whether it's Nashville, whether it's somewhere else. I think he's going to be one of the most beloved players around the league for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And let's go back to the big boy Preds because they have 31 games left to do something.
Yeah,
whether that's tank, whether that's make a playoff run. So what should the Predators' goals be for the rest of the year? We're going to talk about 3 goals for the Nashville Predators to have for the rest of the season, coming up here in just 1 second. Want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Folks, it's the week of the Super Bowl, and I know you guys are ready to celebrate. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing all the snacks, grabbing some beer, getting ready for the commercials, and if you're like me, placing some super bets. I'm talking about things like how long the national anthem is going to be, who's going to win the coin toss, what color is the Gatorade, all kinds of fun stuff. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, wants to help you celebrate Super Bowl Sunday with a couple of W's. So not only can you bet on who will win Super Bowl 58 with FanDuel, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, how like over under on stats for Patrick Mahomes, Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, and others. So much more, so many ways to win on FanDuel. And if you're a new customer, join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. That's right. All you have to do is bet $5 and you could win $200 in bonus bets. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Ann, we are talking about the Preds' last 31 games of the season. Holy bejeebus, did this season fly by fast.
Yeah, it did.
So now the Predators have less than half of the season left. There are some things that you and I would like to see the team achieve for the rest of the year. So not necessarily like, things we want to see them do on the ice or anything like that. Just three goals that would maybe make this rest of the year a success for the Predators, regardless of how it turns out in the standings. So, Ann, what is our first goal for the Nashville Predators for the second half of the year?
Okay, this may seem odd that something seemingly so little is a goal, but for me, I really think one of the things that absolutely has to happen in this last stretch is the Nashville Predators need to trade Tyson Barrie and get something back in return. And I know that it seems odd to say, okay, a big goal for the whole team is one player who doesn't necessarily even crack the lineup with any sort of regularity. How is this something that should be a goal for the Predators? But I think there's a couple layers to it that make this something really important. First of all, I think it's very clear that there really isn't a place for Tyson Barrie right now with the direction the Nashville Predators are going. And at some point you have to call it. You have to call it for him and get him somewhere where he feels like, he's going to be contributing. He's obviously struggling to get into the lineup here. But I also think you have to make space for the next. And yes, you aren't doing that while you keep Tyson Barrie on the roster. So for me, even though it seems crazy, I really think that something that's got to be at the top of the to-do list for Barry Trotz is you've got to move Tyson Barrie.
You hit on, to me, what was maybe the key point in that argument, and that's open up a space for someone else.
Right.
Because right now, it seems like anytime Tyson Barrie is in the lineup, minus, somebody like Carrier being banged up or something like that, it's just to sort of get him minutes.
Right.
Like just to kind of put him out there for the sake of being out there. And oftentimes, unfortunately, it hasn't worked. Like I feel like this season, especially since this trade, request was sort of got out there, leaked, right, or whatever the situation surrounded it being, his value, I think, has gone down from just how lackluster his play has been over the past couple of months. So it's doing more harm than good to kind of just have him out there every 3-4 games, keep his skates warm under him, all that kind of stuff. So if you're Barry Trotz, you need to get this resolved sooner rather than later. Because every time you put him on the ice just to kind of get his skates under him, you're losing time to maybe evaluate somebody like Dante Fabro and Alexander Carrier, two guys on expiring contracts that you're trying to figure out, okay, are they 82-game players? Is there a long-term fit for them on this team? You may be taking a spot away from a Spencer Stastny.
Yes.
Who maybe is ready for kind of permanent NHL minutes, and he can't get them because there's kind of a log jam of players that you kind of want to yeet off the roster over the next couple of months.
Yeah.
You need to kind of get this resolved. And my question to you, Ann, is how long or what's the interest going to be before Barry Trotz goes, you know what, screw it, it's waivers time. Like, let's just put him on waivers, get him off, see if anybody puts a claim on him. And if not, he's a free agent at the end of this year anyway.
Yeah. You know what? It's funny. The longer this goes on, I think the closer that is going to be to how this ends. And you would hate to see it end that way for a couple of reasons. Look, Tyson Barrie, very well liked. He's very well respected. Andrew Brunette has said, he's handling this like a professional. The guys in the locker room speak very highly of him. You want to see this guy go somewhere and continue his career. The flip side of that is the Nashville Predators, they need that space. Yeah. So at this point, it would be a win to get a 5th round draft pick. It would, to get anything at this point would be a win for both parties. But you are coming down the wire to the place where Barry Trotz is going to have to do something, and you're going to get to that point. And I don't think the Predators want to hang on to this, nor does Tyson Barrie, I'm guessing, until the end of the season where he's a UFA. Like, it's not just, hey, he's not a long-term piece. It's that we have pieces we want to put in the puzzle now, and you are just wasting time. So I would hate to see it, but I would not be surprised if nothing else can happen if we end up in that spot.
Yeah.
It's tough.
It's got to get resolved sooner or later. Yeah. That's for sure. All right, Ann, what is goal number 2?
I think the second goal, and we've kind of hinted at it with this whole Tyson Barrie conversation, but I think one of the most important things that Barry Trotz needs to do in these 31 games is you have to pick your permanent pieces.
Yes.
And you would think that this would be relatively easy, because I think all of us looking at the roster after training camp said, hey, we can tell you who our permanent pieces are going to be. We can tell you who we're going to build around. But I'm not sure the season has unfolded around some of those players like we anticipated they would. So Barry Trotz really has to spend some time evaluating, who are my long-term guys? Is Phil Tomasino a long-term piece? Is Luke Evangelista a long-term piece? Another one, what about Juuso Parssinen? Is he going to come back up and be a long-term piece? Cody Glass, at some point in time, you have to be able to say, these are the guys. Like we're going to make some other changes. This is certainly not the roster that 3 years from now, Barry Trotz hopes is going to be a contender. Of course it's not. But you got to figure out, who are your 4 or 5 young guys that you're like, yeah, we're all in on them, and we're going to keep developing them to get them to that point. And I just don't know that we have had a season in which Barry Trotz can say with tons of confidence, or maybe he can, but those of us watching, who are your permanent pieces? It's been an up and down season.
Yeah, we hinted at it before the season started. It's like this year kind of felt like the first few weeks of American Idol. Like it's like after the auditions, but before they really got into the contest. It's like where they just have like the 40 or so people where it's like they're good enough to be invited to Hollywood, but maybe they're not like the 16 or 20 finalist or
right.
I watched American Idol for 1 season, so don't
Kelly Clarkson.
Yeah. And so I think it's that sort of thing where it's like, look, we see something in you. We're just trying to figure out where you fit. So I think, you saw just sort of the bevy of 1-year contracts and stuff like that. I think that was kind of the goal, is just to audition people. And you mentioned, a couple of names about like, hey, whether this is sort of, whether they're a piece moving forward or not. To me, there are 4 key players in particular that I think the Preds are going to need to make a decision on soon. Mm-hmm. And we will talk about those players coming up in just 1 second.
We are all driven by the search to get better, just like the Nashville Predators. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform. They have over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. So the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and say you heard about Indeed on our podcast. Again, check it out at Indeed.com/lockedon. If you need to hire, you need Indeed.
All right, Ann, we are talking 3 goals for the Nashville Predators in this last 31 games. As we talked about, goal number 2 was figuring out the pieces that are going to be here long term.
Yes.
To me, it boils down, I think, at this point, Ann, to 4 people. Alexander Carrier.
Yep.
It's going to come down to Yakov Trenin.
Yeah.
It is going to be Tommy Novak. And I hate to say it, but I think it's going to be Cody Glass.
Oh, yeah.
Because here's the thing. I didn't include Dante Fabro because I think it's a foregone conclusion they're going to move Fabro.
Yeah.
One way or another.
Yeah. And nobody should be surprised.
No, I mean, if he's technically a restricted free agent, so he could be back, but
yeah.
I don't know. But here's the thing: Carrier, unrestricted free agent. This was a guy a couple of years ago who looked like he might be, sort of that 1B piece opposite Roman Josi, or sort of the law, like at least a long-term top 4 piece, kind of a 20-minute a night guy. Now it seems like, Barry Trotz and Andrew Burnett may be questioning that a little bit, or just really trying to, understand what his ceiling is. And I can guarantee you, like, regardless of what his ceiling is, there are going to be teams at the deadline interested in a player like Carrier to round out their defense, maybe enough to, send a first-round pick the Nashville Predators' way. I mean, we've seen, trades like that for sort of rental top 4 defensemen in the past. It's not a stretch. So, I mean, if the Predators really don't see Alexander Carrier as a long-term piece, or they can't find a contract situation that fits, you might want to just move him at the deadline and see what kind of value is out there. Because I guarantee there's going to be some pieces asking around. Trenin, that one I think is self-explanatory. He's an unrestricted free agent. And I think there's, it seems like everything that we have from Yakov Trenin at this point is what we're going to get from Yakov Trenin.
Yeah.
I don't think there's, much more in the tank left to sort of bring out, in terms of development. So I think what we see is what we get. And, the Predators have to kind of make decisions like, okay, is what we're going to get from him worth, maybe $1.5 to $2 million a year for 2-3 years?
Right.
Or do we want to kind of cut our losses and see, is there a better option out there with maybe a more higher ceiling, or maybe a more bang for your buck option? The thing with Tommy Novak is, hey, he's also a free agent at the end of this year. And look, he started hot. He looked like he was kind of the heir apparent, the number 2 center on this team, was scoring really, really well, keeping up with the pace he had last year. Then the injury kicked in, and he just hasn't quite looked the same since he's been back. Now I think you have to figure out, it's like, look, is this just kind of a slump, or do we just kind of see peak Tommy Novak, and he's not necessarily going to get back to that level again? If it's 2, then all of a sudden maybe you need to strike while the iron's hot, because there are teams out there desperate for center help. A team like the Rangers who need center depth. maybe would be willing to spend for a player like Tommy Novak on a very cheap contract. Somebody like Toronto, who is also maybe looking for some depth, more scoring depth beyond that really good top six. Somebody like Tommy Novak, who has a nothing contract basically at this point, would not only fit in well, but Toronto could afford him.
Right.
And so teams like that, there's going to get some interest from Tommy Novak. And the other one, Cody Glass, I mean, it's time, man. Like, I think it's just time to kind of see, look, is he going to be in there? Like, is he going to be what you think he's going to be?
Mm-hmm.
Or is this going to be a situation where, he's going to play sort of a half in it, half out of it role for, 60 games, be healthy scratched every now and then? Because if so, maybe it's time to kind of boot that project to the curb.
I do think that the last 31 games, especially for Cody Glass, are going to be so important, because you really haven't gotten a chance to see peak Cody Glass this season with the injuries. So I think that's a really tough one. And I think that's one of those calls, as much as I hate to say it, I think Barry Trotz is going to have to kind of spend some time thinking about that, because you have to decide, was this season the exception? Was this season the rule? And he's got 31 games to really kind of show, this is who I really am apart from injury, and kind of getting back to the game that they had. Another one that I'm really curious to see what they do with, Michael McCarron.
Yes.
I'm very curious to see what Barry Trotz is going to do. Is Michael McCarron going to be a permanent kind of depth piece? Look, you can love him, you can hate him, but he brings some specific things to the table. This is not somebody that's going to develop into a top six guy. So you have to weigh that out. Like, what you see from Michael McCarron is really kind of what you're going to get from Michael McCarron. Is that enough to say, hey, you know what? You're going to be a permanent depth piece for this team? I don't know. So I do think there are some really big decisions that Barry Trotz has to make, and he's got 31 games to make them, or a couple of good phone calls.
Yeah, absolutely. Should be interesting to see which direction they go, because there's some other guys too.
Yeah.
I think are kind of fit that bill too. Mark Jankowski, another one doing really well in Milwaukee right now. All right, Ann, third goal for the Nashville Predators for the end of the year.
Yep. And this ties into kind of the first two that we've talked about. And I think one thing that absolutely has to happen for the Nashville Predators, you've got to get some young players more experience. And this means a couple of different things. This means maybe you need to start putting somebody like Phil Tomasino, somebody like Luke Evangelista in a top role, and see, can they sink? Can they swim? We've talked about, do you come back from the break and kind of break up that top line and see if putting somebody like a Nyquist or a Forsberg with a Novak, an Evangelista, a Tomasino elevates these young players' games. So I think you're going to have to start putting them in situations a little more sink or swim. Andrew Burnett's been very careful to kind of monitor progress. And when he feels like they're kind of starting to struggle, he pulls back and healthy scratches them, which is something you kind of have to do in development. But at some point, you almost in these last 31 games have to throw them into the deep end of the pool and say, okay, what are we doing? Because really, we haven't seen these young guys in top roles yet, playing in high stakes chances. The other thing is, this means you need to see some people from Milwaukee. Who do you have in Milwaukee? You want to make these decisions about Alexander Carrier, Dante Fabro. Who do you have in Milwaukee? Recall Spencer Stasny. You and I have talked a lot about Mark Del Gaizo. This is a defenseman that not a lot of people outside of Milwaukee and Nashville have talked about, but this is somebody who's got a lot of upside. But you also have to give some of these other AHL players a shot. You've got to see what's coming up. Does that mean Mark Jankowski, like you mentioned? Does that mean Igor Afanasyev? Does that mean Zachary Leroux? There are some players that maybe need to dip their toe in the NHL water, not necessarily to say, hey, they're going to become a permanent piece of the team, but to say, where are they in their development? Fedor Svechkov, Joachim Kimmel, where are they? Let's gauge it in a couple of NHL games. And so they're at a point in these last 31 games where we've got to see some of these young players and evaluate where they are.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you on that. And I know I think it was either with 1025 or maybe with Sportsnet, but Barry Trotz did an interview where they're like, hey, why haven't, we seen these kind of players up here yet? And he's like, well, we're just making sure that they can handle, a full-time NHL call-up. I think the people he mentioned Afanasieff, he mentioned LaRue, and I think he mentioned Joachim Kennel.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, look, we're very confident that if we called up those guys, they would do exactly what we need them to do. We just don't know if they're ready for, to be on the roster full-time yet. And, I think we've seen it with, Evangelista, Tomasino, where they're being very slow. They're putting them in for 5 games, maybe giving them a healthy scratch the 6th. I don't necessarily know if that's the best thing to do with somebody like Joachim Kemell. Like, would you rather have him just be on the top line in Milwaukee, continue to grow his game? Or would you rather have him kind of be an in and out kind of piece in Nashville? So not only do you need, I think, to start seeing where these guys are at on the NHL level,
right,
but I think there has to be space for them to sort of grow on their own. The next thing for me is put Evangelista and Tomasino, even Cody Glass, if he's still around, in situations where it's their team. Like we saw at the end of last year, that's when they thrived.
Yes.
Where you would go, look, I don't care if you make a mistake. I don't care if you have a bad shift. You're going right back out the next shift. You're not going to be like, okay, well, you're a little rough, so we're going to keep you out the 3rd period. Like, we don't need that. We need that. It's like, okay, if you screw up again, that's fine. We're just putting you back out there. Keep going out there until you get it right. And if you really just do something stupid, then we'll keep you out. But we need you to make those mistakes to grow and kind of build confidence. And then, other than that sort of period last year where they had to, the Predators just haven't had that opportunity to give that to their young players.
Right. And I think it's been so tricky because the Predators have been just successful enough that you almost don't want to risk a postseason chance by doing that. But I also agree with you. I think you have to put them in those situations at this point in the season to evaluate them. It's a little bit sink or swim, and they need those opportunities.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what the Nashville Predators do for the rest of the season. And where can people find your work?
You can find my work online at InsideThePreds.com. You can find me on social media at ANK_Mama on Ice.
You can read my work at PenaltyBoxRadio.com or follow me on social at _NSMorgan. That's going to do it for us on today's Locked On Predators podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Back with an all-new episode tomorrow. We'll see you then.